Welcome to What I Meant to Say, where we discuss parenting, relationships, and wisdom that can be passed down through generations. I am so excited to introduce to everybody Dr. Mala today. She is a psychologist and coach, mother of four, and as passionate about self-awareness and healing as I am. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We found each other through Podmatch, and when I saw your story, when I saw the mother of four, and then all of the areas that you have coached in and delved into to really bring about greater self-awareness, which is just something that I'm so passionate about with my own kids. And like I was saying before, I often wonder how much can we teach them and how much do they have to learn through experience? Tell me a little bit about how you got into your line of profession, and tell me about the ages of your kids, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I got into psychology at a time where people didn't really understand psychology and mental health, and it was definitely even more stigmatized than, today. Arguably, we're talking about it more. We're talking about mental health and wellness, and I'm so thankful for that. So, a lot of what I'm now able to do, which is advocacy, is easier because of that growth. But I got into it because, I was just purely interested in the brain and sciences, and that was my background. I first got my degree in cognitive behavioral sciences and was just enthralled by the world of the brain and what wasn't known as well as what was known. And then I realized very quickly that there was a want to connect with people, to really sit down and listen to people's stories and to help them with whatever hurdles there might be. And more often than not, of course, we learn in very basic, psychology, Psych 101, if you will, that there's a lot that's rooted to your childhood. And where that comes from was 100%, I would say, not really understood or known. How that was passed down and what you carry with you was 100% not fully understood. But those, threads really make an impact in how we are today, how we behave today, what we do in our interactions with not only our peers, but also our children, our spouses, and what have you. So that got me thinking. I started to realize that really fast, and that took me into marriage and family psychology, which was my second degree. And, just really being able to focus on the family unit, on relationships. It was called marriage and family at the time. Now we call it, relationships and family. So, really looking at the inner workings of how relationships work, trust, understanding that, none of this journey that we're on is linear, right? So how to navigate the variances, right? And that was a huge passion of mine. And then that took me to my doctorate program where I just, studied even more on it, on relationships, on development, on business psychology, and, like how the inner workings of business, atmosphere and society contributes not only to the wellness of the company, but also is an extension of a family unit for the individual, right? And again, that concept right there wasn't fully understood when I was up and coming in this field. Now today, I think it's easier, and certainly coming past COVID with the realization of, how to bring global teams together, we're seeing that work family unit be not just a work family unit that's in an office, but globally, it's a global reach, a global room. So being able to navigate those relationships as well is a big passion of mine, and how the interplay of what your roots are and what you have been given and what you're inclined to pass down integrates into your work environment. That's a big one that I think people don't understand as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have definitely seen that. And it's an eye-opening experience when you realize that the way you run your household, is you bring it into the business space and relate to people in that way. And the dynamic nature of human connection and how important it is,
Yes. Yeah.
really draws you back to for me, wanting to know my backstory. And
Mm.
I actually got to this space because I went through a divorce about 7 years ago, and it was super eye-opening to
Yeah.
go. I kind of just had to know how I got here.
Right.
My kids were uh, 16 to 9 at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and it just I was shell shocked,
Yes.
and
Sure.
I didn't know enough about my backstory, and I started writing, and it's really no fault of, I don't, it's no fault of anybody. I think generationally we treated these things different. The World War II generation was the stiff upper lip and,
Yes.
let's just keep marching on. And I think as we are unwinding,
Mm-hmm.
we're
Mm-hmm.
learning more about, how to unwind that backstory to just not blame anybody, but really understand more so that we can
Right.
connect better.
Right.
And I began parenting that way,
Yeah.
and it looked really different and it felt
Mm-hmm.
really different. But there's so many modalities that go into that.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and then you start to learn about yourself and you become a better parent, you become a healthier person, and
Mm-hmm.
everything shifts and changes. But so, I'd love to know more. I know you're into the integrative
Yes.
circle. And, as psychology has been over the years, the more you dig into it, everything is connected, right? From our guts to our sleep patterns to
Uh,
everything. So, how do you help people really understand how intimately connected health and mental health is?
well, the easy answer to that is when you feel something like pain, that's tangibly physical, like you're feeling pain, you feel a bellyache, you have a cut on your arm. What does that do to your attention? It grabs it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those sensations, pain, discomfort, grabs your attention and arguably speaking will be louder as a message because what is your brain doing? It's saying, warning, something is not right, right? Please fix this. That's why that mechanism is there. Interestingly enough, when we feel good, are we recognizing what we're doing to feel good? Right?
Yeah.
So, it's easy to focus on the negative. Generally speaking, it's easier to focus on the negative, and that has roots. The roots are just survival. Like really, we're operating from this limbic system. What I like to call the limbic system loop, where your brain is basically programmed to help you with surviving. To protect you against harm, which is why it will naturally draw towards those negatives as a warning sign so that you can optimize and be better. But instead of only focusing on that negative, we really need to focus on the positive as well to optimize for what makes us feel good and better, right? To enhance that even further and be preventative, right? So that's where the conversation usually starts, for me. And
Yeah.
uh, if it's not understood, they think that's the easiest way to think about it is like, well, pain is an attention seeker, it's an attention grabber. But the good stuff, how are you allowing that to show up in your life? Are you paying attention to that? What does that look like? How does that feel?
Yeah. No, there's such a distinction there, and that the limbic brain and that fight or flight and just the need for survival versus being able to move out of that. And what it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of is just, the power of gratitude and the lists that I've made over the years, or the ways, like when I wake up in the middle of the night, I know to seek, okay, what am I grateful for to put me back to sleep rather than let my mind. But it takes
Exactly.
a lot of awareness, and there's so many things out there that feel so threatening that
Mm-hmm.
it's really is a cognitive process to pull yourself out of that limbic brain.
It is because, and I say this too, whereas before when we were, like running around in the jungle as cave people, it was very blatant, the tigers, the snakes, the bugs, the plants, the things that we needed to be aware of to protect ourselves. Today, our jungle looks a little different, and because our brains have arguably grown, and
Yeah.
in processing and our abilities to understand the world around us, we now have different tigers and snakes and plants and things to be afraid of. They're the business offices and they're the bosses and they're the spouses and they're the friends and the politics and all of the other things, that I think weigh our minds down on a daily basis. And sometimes we take them for granted because they're not a tiger jumping at us, right? So we think, it's not really, pushing us in the direction of having to run or, curl up into a little ball. But internally we're feeling that way because all of these things, all of these nuances that just build up and pile up, they do just that.
Mhm.
And they become rocks in a backpack that we're carrying with us going uphill, right? So then
Yeah.
how to navigate that becomes the question. And how we navigate that, what we've walked into our arguably adult life with, right, is usually a product of what we've seen, other people do, modeling, right?
Mhm.
And what we've adapted for ourselves on top of what we've seen, not to mention any propensities and behavior that we might have, right?
Yeah.
And that's kids come in. So you asked about my kids. I have 4 kids.
Yes.
They're between the ages of 5 and 14. And so it's 5, 10, 11, and 14. And like you said yourself, it's a daily thing for me and my husband to navigate and analyze, like, okay, wait a second, how did we get that backpack of rocks? What are we carrying and why are we carrying it? And then also to be able to sit with them and say, okay, yeah, you did get the scrape on your knee and it's okay. But do you remember what it felt like to feel better when you didn't have the cut on your knee? And then it's really interesting to see how they navigate through, like, oh, wait a second, this isn't permanent. We can work through this, right? There
Yeah.
are ways to get through this. So, yeah.
As a couple, how do you help your kids navigate just a really open conversation about human feelings? Because I feel like in the past, there was a lot of, whether it was a negativity bias or just like uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. How do you
Yeah,
help from a young age to normalize that conversation so that kids feel good feeling their feelings, all of them?
for sure. For sure. Yeah. No, that has been an ongoing conversation for us in this household. You are going to feel every feeling, and that's a good thing because that means you're alive. That means your body parts are functioning. That means your brain is functioning. That means your heart is beating. So feel it because that's what life is. That's quite literally the message that we give them. And, especially with our teens and preteens, we're seeing them get to that place of like feeling uncomfortable with, maybe admitting to some emotions, even if they're positive emotions, the natural shyness that comes with being attracted to somebody or, a curiosity as to, of course, what's going on with development, but being uncertain and as a result of that uncertainty, maybe doubting oneself, And so those really specific feelings, right, may show up in other ways. As it's going to show up as the temper tantrum or the, attitude or the back talk or, like the refusal to come down for dinner or, like something like that. And so that just warrants itself to a sideline conversation where we say, hey, what's up? What's going on? This isn't your norm. So tell me what's taking you off the path, what's derailing you right now in this moment, and then getting them to the place of being able to feel comfortable to talk. And even if they don't know what to say. So my favorite answer, of course, is I don't know. you know,
Hmm. Oh
uh,
yeah, I've heard that.
and they'll, want to shut down for a minute. I say, okay, it's okay if you don't know right now, but let's come back and talk about this. You want to take 5 minutes and then, get a grab a glass of water, and then we'll come back and we'll talk. And then like, okay, and then it happens, so they learn that in so doing, they learn that they're able to take that space and breathe, and that doing so is okay, because it doesn't mean you're being abandoned or that you are allowed to abandon what you're feeling and avoid the conversation, right? We're coming back, that that's there, and feeling what you're feeling is okay, and we can talk about it.
It's beautiful, and it really has to come from such a grounded place. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much stress out there, in America and in families and households across the country. Do you have any tips for parents to be able to find that place? Because when your child is ramped up, I mean, we all know what's the saying, you're as happy as your most unhappy child, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when your child is ramped up or they're going through something, it's hard. It can feel unsafe as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but the obligation or the responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
be the grounded one, it sits heavy. It's hard sometimes. So how can parents ground themselves to be able to parent from that place of calm?
Sure, sure. The grounded, of course, there's activities and exercises and such for grounding. I can't recommend more mindfulness, meditation, exercise, art, expressing your emotions that way and utilizing those and having that, kind of like self-care bucket of tools to lean in on, of course. Okay, that's a given. But when you're feeling something, you're feeling something. And the first thing to remember is that number one, you're entitled to what you're feeling because they're yours, right? So acknowledging those emotions and understanding that they're okay for you to be feeling what you're feeling, that's the first step. So it's an acknowledgement, A. The second thing is thinking to yourself, okay, what is it that I'm wanting? Which is essentially what is creating that disparity, where you're saying, like, I'm uncomfortable here and I'm acknowledging what that is, but this is what I really want. That's why this is bothering me, right? So then if you get to the acknowledgement of what you want, and then you say, okay, wait, I get it. This is what I see. This is what I'm wanting to hold on to, right? This is what I'm aspiring to. Then you say, great, now I'm an action plan. What does that action plan mean in the long term? What does that mean in the medium term? What does that mean right here, right now, in this moment, right? So if I know that I have my teen who's going through whatever issues they're going through at the moment and they need support, but I'm somewhere in the middle of the first two stages of acknowledgement, like I feel something off myself, but I need to get to that place to be able to be present for them. It's really focusing in on it's okay that I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, that acknowledgement piece. And I know that I will figure out what it is that I'm wanting, right? So then I breathe and then I say, okay. And I bet you my teen is feeling the exact same thing, right? So then there creates this, it's a bridge that's created, right? In that, what I'm experiencing as an adult, not necessarily the situation, but the process of processing the situation is the same that my teen is going through or that my child is going through. So I can walk them through the same steps and not only reground myself, but ground my teen to feel like they can do this as well. And we're doing it as a unit then, they're not alone, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I would recommend. So it's my AAA method. That's what I like to call it. It's acknowledge, what you're feeling bad about. And it's okay that you're feeling bad about it, right? Because we're entitled to our feelings. Acknowledge what it is that you're wanting, and what it is that's creating that discomfort again. Like that's why you're feeling that discomfort. So what's the disparity, right? What is it that we need to do to get to that place of ideal, right? Then third A, action planning, right? Okay, what does it look like? Like I said, long-term, medium term, and then in the present moment to be able to work towards it.
I love simple frameworks. When it gets crazy out there, those are amazing things to come back to. So, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
of course, of course.
Um, yeah, so there's something about a lot of my kids, myself included, and my kids are very sensitive, and we hear more and more about highly sensitive people or empaths, or when the world comes in really, really strong.
Mm-hmm,
And sometimes as a parent, I can't tell the difference between intuition and anxiety.
mm-hmm,
Does,
mm-hmm.
do you have any insight, or do you have anything to say about how to tell the difference between insight or intuition, trusting your intuition as a parent, or
Mm-hmm.
anxiety for what might be coming down the pipeline?
Well, arguably speaking, the intuition that you have probably was birthed or somehow reinforced by anxiety, like something that made you nervous at one point. You learned, how to overcome that, and then that's what your brain and your body and all of like, okay, wait, that's what I need to be afraid of, and there's a warning sign, a wanted sign, if you will, up for anything that might resemble that at all in my life. So your intuition arguably builds off of experience that you've had, both good and bad, both anxiety provoking and not, non-anxiety.
Mhm.
So I would say that the incoming anxiety that you might be feeling about something is likely newer, or even if it's new right now, you've probably felt something similar to it because we've all felt anxiety across a variety of different categories in our life. So you might feel that it's new because it's a new subject, but the likelihood of you having experienced it before is like 100% there, or 99% there, because anxiety is an ongoing thing. When it's repeated and you've overcome it, right, then you build an intuition and you're just like, I know what to look out for, right? So that to me is the difference. Anxiety is almost like the birthing point of the starting point of creating a sense of intuition, if you will.
There's a lot of things that as families, they're hard to discuss, right? And I think probably in your practice, you see a lot of things that affect generationally. They affect families generationally, whether it's, addiction, or, just
Yeah.
divorce, relationship troubles, and, obviously there are good things too. But when I went to unwind some of my story and to be able to understand it better, I discovered some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can help families understand the importance of not being ashamed of what happened in the past,
Oh, yeah.
but
Mhm.
knowing that the more we know, the better off, the better equipped we are to handle things. So what are some of the red flags and things that you would hope families would discuss?
In terms of experience, and what let's say I've gone through, and how that could help. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say you want to strategically talk about it all. There's no reason that your experience needs to be sheltered across the lifespan of your child, right? There's a time and a place to disclose past traumas and experiences that you might have gone through and overcome, because that is not only part of your story and who you are today, but it does not define you, right? That's an important point. But it's something that I think gives insight to children so that they know, wait a second, like this helps me understand who you are, and what you are going through. And my goodness, like I know that I can learn from your experiences, right? Um, and oftentimes it puts into context like what we're used to, when we say don't do this, or, watch out for this, like it'll put into context those kinds of things. And that's very generally speaking. I do believe that there's a time and a place to talk about specific, incidents and situations and things that we've overcome. that are age appropriate as well, you know. But yeah, my general answer to that is we should have a genuine relationship with our children, because then that makes them understand that that is who they should be, and also call for that in the relationships that they engage in as well.
Yeah, because I've noted, I know now perfectionism is one of the greatest, blocks to our real, genuine happiness and
Yeah.
authenticity in relationship. And nothing feels better than
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to put on that show, I think so often, we fall into those patterns generationally and we fall into them without even knowing. I know I did. Like I
Yeah.
never would have considered myself a perfectionist because I didn't get straight A's or I didn't, you
Mm-hmm.
know, reach the highest levels of whatever school or sport or so I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was perfectionism. But what I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize was that I was perfectioning myself to death. And I
Right.
think so many people, in the face of all the comparison that we have available to us today, are doing
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So as far as, you know, being able to parent and, treat ourselves with kindness, what
Mm-hmm.
would be some of your tips on dealing with perfectionism?
Um, the first thing is to realize that you will be more perfect, quote unquote, right? Um, if you let yourself breathe. So essentially, like if you loosen, the vice that's around your brain, and stop overthinking it and perseverating on it, then you're going to give yourself the space to be creative and to actually produce what you want to produce at the level you want to produce it more effectively. So that's the number one thing to remember. When you feel yourself getting wound up and tightened up and like you're not breathing, and all of a sudden shallow breathing takes over and you're sitting at work like this and whatever, that's when you got to stop and you got to say, okay, wait a second. First, I'm going to stop wearing my shoulders as earrings, and
Yes.
I'm going to take a minute here and breathe and get up and move and circulate and look out the window, go out for a walk, like whatever it is. And remember that you're a human in a world with beautiful things and a beautiful life, right? Go back to that gratitude. So giving
Yeah.
yourself that space to breathe and regrounding yourself when you feel that tightness is essential, especially for those of us who tend to go into that line of thinking with, oh my God, I got to get this right. I got to get it perfect. And the other point that I would say is that you will get to that place of perfect the more you do, right? We talk about this even in the podcasting world or the YouTubing world or the TikToking world or whatever, is that people get nervous with how they're putting themselves out there right off the bat, right? Oh, I've got to have it right. That's what's going to get me all the followers and all the things. No, the answer is you just got to start, right? You have to
Yeah.
start. You have to put yourself out there. Sure, think about what your messaging is. Think about what it is that you want to represent and who you are, and what aspects of yourself you want to have represented and put out there. But that message will continue to be refined the more you do, right? So I can't advocate enough how important it is to just give yourself a chance, right?
Yeah.
Know
I
that
absolutely.
that's even the breath of fresh air. It's like how many times have we engaged in conversations or even conversations with ourselves, through that creative process where you sit there and you go, oh my God, oh, there it is, and you breathe, right?
Yeah.
Because you just did what? You just started. You just did, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's easier advice to give than to handle yourself because I've told my, third and fourth borns so many
Mhm.
times because they don't remember when the first two were learning something and I realized they were growing up thinking they were always good at this or that, always good at school, always good at volleyball. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, they didn't know that either. There were a lot of hours before you guys, remember that they put
Mhm.
in. They weren't
Yeah.
always good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's a huge message, especially in bigger families where, kids just they're going after it, and that perfectionism sets in because they have somebody above them that they're trying
Right.
to chase. And it
Right.
can be an amazing example. And I
Right.
love big families for that reason, but it's something really important to remember. Like
For sure.
everybody starts off at ground zero.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And I think the only place that I would say I wish it was a little faster with the kids is with cleaning their rooms, but that's okay.
Oh, amen. Amen. And sometimes you have to remember, yeah, giving them, cleaning their room. And then the other night I got up and was like, you could clean the kitchen for me and I
Right.
can go. You have the skill. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
holding them to those. It makes your house run so much more smooth.
Right, right, right.
Right? Yes.
Yes, 100%. So, but all joking aside, it's like they're aspiring, in a direction. Of course, they're modeling after whoever they're seeing, whoever that person is. Maybe it's you, maybe it's, father figure, whoever, right? And it's important to stop them and say, you're doing this. You're on the track. You've got it. Just because, even if you don't see the numbers or the performance or whatever, just because you have the heart for it, right? And so going back to your earlier questions, like how do you reinforce the feeling of everything, right? It's recognizing where, like that mind, body, that heart, the soul of what you're doing is literally integrated into everything that you do and has the option to be integrated into everything that you do. You can take pleasure in folding the laundry with perfection,
Mm-hmm.
right? Quote unquote again, just as you do with looking to perform well on the track team or be really good at martial arts or sing, right?
Why is there a difference? And I remember thinking, I had that realization probably in my 30s where I was like, if you can really learn to enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
mundane, life
Mm-hmm.
is such a beautiful place
Oh
because
yeah.
most of our lives are mundane.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
the driving and the shopping and the,
Right. Right.
laundry.
Yeah.
But if you notice the gratitude for having all of these things,
Right.
and I
Right.
think our lives get going so fast and people we're always looking for the next thing, and it's really not that. And I know that's something maybe that comes later in life,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's such an important thing to ground into a home
Right.
because I've had every level of, wealth and thought processes and things that I knew and didn't know. And the truth is like the joy in the present moment for what you have, there's nothing beats it.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. My husband makes fun of me. So, and this has actually shifted our tasks in the house, but I used to sit with an iron and, all my essential oils when doing the laundry, and I would take my time and like fold with my iron and do all these things, and that brought me a lot of joy. And he's like, "Oh my God, you're taking way too long. I'm taking over." And so he's like, watch, I can do this all with my hand, and so yeah, so there's that battle, but I'm like, but I have fun doing it. He's like, okay, fine, you do you, I do me, like, and I'm like, absolutely, but that's the thing, it becomes a party, right? The laundry becomes a party, the packing for the trip or the unpacking for the trip becomes a party, and then you share that with the kids so that they don't have to think of it as a chore, right?
So good. And what that's reminding me of, I've kind of come up with this theory because I didn't realize how joy in the present moment with whatever you are doing, how ingrained and linked that is to the state of your nervous system,
Yes, yes,
right?
100%.
And how we can help our kids and ourselves understand that
Mhm.
when we can find that, balance between our sympathetic and parasympathetic, the way that we see the world changes.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that is, and then I realized, we all have that individually, but I've
Hmm.
started to think about like the collective nervous system of a home or a
Hmm.
workplace, or but there
Yes.
are these because we're all connected and we're all feeding off of each other. And
Hmm.
how how can you teach that concept from how we relate and how important that is?
Well, To the kids, it's easy. How do you feel when things don't feel great? When one person doesn't feel good in the house? Does it make you feel a little weird? Are you sensing something? What does that look like for you? And sometimes the answer is, I didn't even realize, right? So then you talk about awareness, right? And that's such a beautiful starting point is, wait a second, what is awareness? Well, awareness is what you're smelling, what you're hearing, what you're touching, right? Excuse me. Awareness is what we're feeling inside of our bodies, how we're breathing, what's the rate at which I'm breathing? Am I not breathing? Am I shallow breathing? Like, what am I doing? Awareness is, what emotion am I sitting at right now? And that is a message. So if I'm sitting here right now feeling uncomfortable, why? Right? And then that allows you to process and talk and journal and do all the things. If I'm feeling the energy around me, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? Because that can mean something different to everybody, right? So, having the conversation with my son versus my daughters, like it's going to be different. You mentioned empaths. I have one, like my daughter is a sponge, this is my eldest daughter. She takes it all in, and the conversations with her are always along the lines of, wait a second, okay, it is a beautiful thing that you're so aware, right? But you need to remember to take a couple steps back, and not let it be yours, right? Not dictate your path. You can be aware, but still be on your path and still empathize, right? And so
Yeah.
talking about awareness and then now empathy becomes the next step, right?
That's huge. And I think when you have a child that's very sensitive like that,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what your advice would be on letting them realize how strong they are
Mm-hmm.
and still
Mm-hmm.
giving them that protection as
Oh,
a highly sensitive child. Do you know what
100%.
I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, it is a superpower, but just as we all have superpowers, we need to be careful with how much we're using them, and how much we're allowing other people to use them, and, how much we're essentially allowing it to emanate out of us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Because that's when it's like you're exhausted, your batteries are done, right?
Been
So
there. Actually,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
learn by doing. But
100%, 100%.
yeah,
And
yeah,
why again? I'm going to say, why do we feel compelled? Oh, we recognize that superpower, and then we're like, "Ooh, this is my superpower. I can put that on my resume. I can put that on my, I can talk about it in my job interviews. I can, share that with my spouse and my kids." And then it's all of a sudden it's in every single category of every part of your life, and all you're doing is dispensing, 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 and then you're burnt out and you're done, right?
yeah,
And all of a
yeah.
sudden, your superpower, which you cherish so much, is like your battery is down to zero, and you're like, oh my God, who am I?
Right. Exactly. And you lose yourself. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
what are some of those ways that people, particularly empaths or highly sensitive people, can exercise boundaries? Some simple
Yeah.
ways that they can start to do that.
Yeah. Office hours.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, quite literally, it's being able to recognize within yourself when you start to tip over, right, a threshold. That's the worst, right? Like if that, okay, if I'm starting to feel exhausted and now my immune system's going down and I'm tired all the time, I'm cranky, like that's
Mhm.
bad. That's the extreme. So let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, that's your 10, right? I always say, okay, where are you sitting at right now? Right? Kind of like a pain scale evaluation. And if you say, well, I generally sit at about a 4 or 5, then my answer to you would be, okay, what's defining that 4 or 5? What gets you to a 4 or 5, right? And then I say, okay, great. If that's where you're at, then every single day, if you start to creep into a 2.5, you need to stop and take a break, right? So it's essentially emotionally pacing yourself, right? So one
Yeah.
of the things that I love to coach and train is emotional pacing, right? We talk about this from an athletic perspective as well. You know, sports psychology technique, huge. Pacing, right?
Yeah.
Visualization, right? Beautiful. So how do you see yourself emotionally in XYZ situations or categories, whatever might be present right now? And what does it look like to be only at a 2.5? And how can we keep it there? Right? What does it look like to be at a 5? And how do we stop ourselves from getting there? Right? What does it look like to be at that 10? What usually triggers each of those levels, right? And so then that whole anything from like 5 to 10 is this is what you want to be aware of as a trigger, right? To be preventative, to create a preventative plan, right? And then you know now, okay, well, to emotionally pace, this is what I need to do. I need to take my breaks. I need to make sure I'm doing my self-care. I need to talk to somebody, I need to seek help if I see that this is a consistent problem. And I'm not going to let myself get past that 2.5, right?
Yeah. And that's something over the years that I've struggled with. I've really come into to understand. I'm a very sensitive person, and I was always attracted to all kinds of healing arts, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I've learned a lot about them, and now I practice them, and I help other people, with the same energy healing and all of the things that highly sensitive people take in, and we're all taking in, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yes.
But um, I used to be really hard on myself about
Mm,
needing all of these things. And people will say, "Wow, Wendy, you do a lot of things."
yeah.
And but there's something to it really, because we can be so up here in our minds and
Hmm.
be pushing our bodies. And I realize as an athlete, and a lot of the people that listen are athletes or parents of athletes, we can really push our bodies to a point where we're carrying all of that stuff. And
Yes.
that's what I realized in the healing arts. I can sit and talk to a therapist,
Yes.
but it's still, I'm holding it's a,
Yeah.
and so can you talk to people about that very intricate and intimate link and
Mhm.
why those things are so important to engage?
Right. So the thing that I think is important there also is that when we're talking to a therapist, when you're talking to whoever, like you're dispelling it, you're getting it out of your system, which is a great first step. But the question is, how are you bridging that, right? That's what you're asking, because you're still left with that habit of wearing your shoulders as earrings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So first step of that bridge, right, is to practice awareness of self, right? So how are you doing that? And I guarantee it's going to feel forced if you haven't done it, right?
Mhm.
The awareness of your own energy, of how you're holding yourself, of how you're breathing, of what you're feeling inside, and like your core, like that energy source from your core, from your voice, from your mind, like all of those areas. What does that say to you? What is the song that they're singing right now? Being able to listen to that and sit with that, which I have always found through meditation. I always reinforce that through meditation. Um, that is key, because then now if I feel like this is stuck,
Yeah.
right? Then I know I've got to focus my energies on allowing myself to loosen it, right? Open it,
Yes.
free, right? But I have to
Yeah.
have awareness first to be able to get there, right? So then everything hit the categories. What are you feeling physically? What do you need emotionally? What do you need, like around you as a support system to free what you've identified here, right? So that
Right.
bridge is okay, you've gotten it out, you've got a sense of, like an idea of what the issue is, but now the awareness factor is, where is it playing on my body?
Hmm.
Numerous amounts of athletes come to me and, say, in particular, of course, like martial artists, I have a big tie into the martial arts community, but um martial artists will come to me and they're like, ringside, and they're about to go in, and here we are competing, and of course the first question is like, why am I doing this? Right?
Yeah,
Great
right.
question. Let's think about
Uh-huh.
it. But like if there's an injury that's persisting and you're holding that, that pain, you're like, I've done all the therapies, I've done all the things, why is this still bothering me? Let's dig and then let's see how it plays in. So in that sense, if somebody's coming to me and saying, okay, my knee is bothering me, why? Right? Then it's kind of like a backwards journey, right? Because you've got to go, okay,
Mhm.
you got the injury. There's the other path where it's like, wait a second, now I know kind of what the situations and the issues are, that, dispelling of information, but understanding where it's hitting you in your body, that's another journey, right?
Yeah.
So the chronic shoulder pain,
Mhm.
the back pain, the lower back pain, the chronic pain in general, the injury that will not heal, all of those things are linked to, the rocks in the backpack that we're carrying, the burdens that we're carrying. And you have to have that awareness of your own energy and sense of being able to listen to what your body and your mind and your soul need to be able to start that healing process. And that's going to be
Yeah.
different for everyone. That journey is different for everyone.
It is, and it's a hard one to maybe take the first step because
Mm-hmm.
how do you know that you need to be aware,
Right.
right?
Yeah. it,
And
yeah.
it's a question I've asked myself so many times in trying to reach, we find our people and we start to connect in these healing spaces. And I think that space is really growing, which just
Yeah.
it gives me so much
Sure.
gratitude that, yeah,
Yeah.
that it's
Yes.
out there and that we're normalizing this conversation. But I think how do you help people take that first step? Do we have to be in that point of pain, or is there
Oh,
a more proactive place?
yes. I mean, to me, the pain is the 10, right? Like
Right.
that's the worst case scenario. You asked earlier, what is it with aware, how do we do this? The answer is we should be aware. Awareness should be part of our practice. Awareness should be part of our day to day. You need to check in with yourself on a day to day basis. You
Yeah.
need to listen to yourself. Every moment of every day, you need to listen to yourself. Even if you're sitting at your desk and working and plugging away and doing your thing, listen to yourself. You
Yeah.
see, it's really interesting. The other thing that I like to say is emotions run parallel to one another. Just because you're angry at something doesn't mean that you can't be loving that same thing or person, right? So
Yeah.
you can be angry, you can be sad, you can be happy, you can be joyful all at the same time. That's the power of our brains, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, you can be engaged in, life, but in so doing, simultaneously be aware at several levels, aware of yourself, aware of what you're doing, aware of what you need, like right at that moment.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of preventative awareness as to, like what you're anticipating having to drive your son to soccer practice, like,
Right. Well, and what I'm noticing is it really is it's beginning with like everything, it's beginning with the small things, right?
mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm,
awareness. It's not the awareness of this is my backstory and this is my,
right.
it's little pieces and start
Yes,
adding up. Then we're comfortable enough to embrace
exactly.
the bigger things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Embodiment is huge. It
It
really
all
is.
right. And I think, like looking at um all of those different little nuances, the little different pieces, like people don't realize that those little pieces, kind of what we were talking about earlier, is that it all is part of that bigger picture. It's all connected, right? So
Yeah.
it's okay to be in that space of like, whoa, wait a second, what? It is connect. I see it. That awareness also, is a phenomenal moment. But once you get there, ride that wave. Like apply it to your day to day. Apply it to first and foremost connecting to yourself so that you can do all of the other things, so that
Right.
you can be aware for all of the other people in your life and for all of the things in your life that you're doing, you know?
Yeah. No, you're hitting on one of my most fundamental tenets. And like, because we, as humans, we go through such hard things in our lives,
Yeah.
but I truly believe that you find the value and the ability to move through them because you realize that you went through that so that you can help somebody else.
100%. Yeah. Even
But
if that somebody else is you,
yeah,
again.
well, and you have to know, right, your future self, and you have to know yourself to be able to, it does start with you. And
Mhm.
healing starts with, within us. And
Right.
you can never help somebody unless you've walked the walk yourself.
Exactly. And here's the thing, everyone is recovering from something,
Yeah.
period. Right.
Yeah.
So if we understand that, that means that there's nothing to be disingenuous about.
How freeing is that?
It's freeing,
Yeah.
liber absolutely liberating.
Yeah.
We can
That
all
is,
from each other, we can all live together, it can all work out. We can, be different but still be same because we're different. We can, like it, and we can just do it, but we're all recovering from something.
and we're all such multifaceted. Human beings are so
Yes.
amazingly multifaceted creatures,
Yes.
right? And the, something I kind of want to maybe bring this all back around in the end because maybe it's too big of a question as we're getting deep into this conversation. But we're out there in mainstream media today putting people in categories. And
Hmm.
I constantly am thinking, and the thing that I want to promote more than anything is kindness is inclusive.
Yes. Yes.
I do not want my kids or any other kids walking around in the world feeling like they're defined by any one day or one thing in their
Yes.
personality. Or how can we spread that message?
Oh my gosh, sing the song. Thank you for saying that and for advocating for that. I again, for me, it goes back to the people that I'm able to serve. It goes back to my message. It goes back to wanting to make sure that if I missed something, I can correct it and fix it and make it right because we are all allowed to be. Period. We're all allowed to feel. We are entitled to that.
Yeah.
That if you want to talk about a sense of entitlement, that's what we're entitled for, right?
Oh, that gave me the chills. Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Thank you. The biggest thing is that, you know, and especially with our children, we can't say it enough. Honey, we love you no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not
There's
even no
nothing.
matter what, it's no matter what other people may perceive. It doesn't even factor. That doesn't factor, because of course in that teenage phase, it's always like, oh my God, what if they think this? What if they think that? What do you think about you, honey? We love you for you. What do you need? What do you like? Who do you want to be?
Yeah.
Forget about that for a sec. We
Yeah.
don't worry about it. So that's the conversation to answer that question. And if I had to say anything in terms of how we could create more of that inclusivity, again, it's being aware, it's talking about it, it's being genuine about it, it's understanding that we're all recovering from something, it's understanding that we are more alike than we are different, and that
Yeah.
in those differences, air quotes again, like in those differences, we can still enhance each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much we get to learn. And those are the most interesting conversations. So don't be afraid to have them. We don't
Exactly.
all have to think the same thing or be the same. And
Yeah.
yet we are all so intimately connected.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I want
Exactly.
the world, I want those conversations out there, not the ones that are driving us apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Totally
So,
love that. Yes.
well, I want people to be able to connect with you on a deeper healing journey. What's the best place where people can find you?
Yeah, my website. So drmala.net is the best way to find me and get in touch with me. All my information's there. So I'm also on all of the socials. So LinkedIn, TikTok, the handle is at the official Dr. Mala. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you have a beautiful perspective and a wealth of knowledge that the world needs. So thank you for being willing to come on and share today. And
Thank,
I've really enjoyed this. So let's
thank
keep
you.
in touch and keep pushing forward.
Thank you. I agree. I'd love to keep in touch with you, Wendy, and it was wonderful. It was an honor to be on your show.
Thank you for joining us on What I Meant to Say, another production of Inspired Edutainment brought to you by Be Better Media.